Rumana, I know that almost 30 years ago, something which I call the silent revolution in pedagogy started in Pakistan, you know, about creating textbooks which are not uh, designed or approved by the textbook boards, but by the educators themselves, which relate to the reality of the child, and also creating activity books for the teachers,
Right.
showing them how to connect classroom teaching with the outside world, and
Mm-hmm.
then you going out and training those teachers. So that was a very lovely, remarkable work. And one of the things we discovered was people used to say that students in English medium school, they have an arrogance and they don't want to learn anything in Urdu. And once your books went there, they were falling one over the other to get hold of the book because it was different way of teaching. So could you tell us a story how it all began, what happened, and then Manur will be asking follow-up questions. I thought I should get the ball rolling.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fayaz Saab and Mahanur, for having me here. And I'm truly humbled and flattered, whatever you said. Let me just make a correction. We did not create textbooks as such. What we wanted to do was just bring good fiction, storybooks for children in
Okay.
Urdu. And you are right that, and it started because of the school that I was, working with and heading. And so it was this total disinterest in Urdu. Uh, and it wasn't unique to just the school I was at, but also all the other so-called English medium schools, right? So when I was in school myself, when I was growing up, and the school I attended, I think there was a balance. We also had all the subjects in English, and Urdu was just one subject, but a lot depended on the teachers also. Hmm? And I think we did not really know any good books as such. When in my During my childhood, there were magazines, children's Urdu magazines,
Yeah.
like Khilona, Nonehal, Talim Tarbiyat, Phool,
Right.
etc. But storybooks as such were not there. Okay, so when I saw this happening, this apathy, and I don't blame the children, because they didn't take any interest, because you have every subject under the sun, any kind of stories you want, you can in English. I mean, there's so much out there, literature for children, but there was very little in terms of good, interesting, fun books, attractive books with colorful illustrations and so on. So actually, my husband, who is an architect, he used to collect books from, in those days, Karachi used to have, fairs, book fairs, and books they still happen. This was the time when I'm talking about the 70s, and books from India, Russia, and China um, in Urdu were available. Because I mean, as it happens in so many countries, that they create in their own language, and then they have translations and they send out those books to the relevant countries. So he used to collect them, and when I saw those books, I said, they are obviously, the cultural context wasn't there, but still, as stories, as beautiful illustrations, they were very attractive books. And I said, we can do this experiment. And I told the Urdu teachers to use these books in the classroom instead of, the Hilal Urdu that they were using with the black and white illustrations. And we always tend to be highly moralistic. That is also a problem, and that is why children kind of run away from these textbooks as such. So it was quite a successful experiment, and hence, the book group came into being. That is when we started. So it was, this happened sometime in 1986, but the time that the book group actually started functioning was 1980. The year was 1988. And with the first book, one realized that there will have to be a teacher's guide, uh, that you mentioned, that a teacher's manual.
Yeah.
What can the teacher do with this story? So Hasan Ki Gali was the first book, and I was the co-author as well as the illustrator for it. And because my background has been in the arts, I trained as a graphic designer for 4 years. And so that is how it happened, and the ball was rolling.
As I
Mhm.
recall,
Yes,
Hassan Ki Gali was so interesting and beautiful because you start with child's own experience of his or her surrounding
right,
instead of Hamara Pakistan, which is
right,
something abstract. They have no idea what is Pakistan, what is Hamara Pakistan.
yes.
But once they learn to connect with Hassan Ki Gali, their own lane,
Mhm.
then they learn how to relate with other things around, in their
True,
life and go from
true.
there.
It has to be
So,
relevant, yes,
yeah,
to their lives. So we kept creating books, and so once when we had a few of them, then the teachers training started. Because we wanted to take these books to schools and to say that, look, these can be used in the classroom. They don't have to be only in the library. These storybooks you can actually use to teach the language, and you can have so many activities. I remember I even made a board game for Hasan Ki Gali, like snakes and ladders, कि आपने कचरा किया, कूड़ा डाला, तो आप नीचे आ गए और आपने कोई अच्छा काम किया, things like that. So anyway, this is how it. I mean, for a number of years, I continued to be associated, and then for 4 years, I mean, all that was voluntary work for about 8 to 10 years, and then for 4 years, after I left the school, I was the director of the book group. But then, for various reasons, I left. But I haven't looked back, in the sense that I have continued to write for children and illustrate for children. So that has been happening. I've done, I think, over 70 books for children. So, and for different publishers and so on. Yeah.
My first question for you is about the teacher's manual. I
Mhm.
find that so interesting. What indicated that the teachers required a manual or training to use the books?
Because you see, once we took the book, that one book, I remember we went to Orangi town, and there was like a, total non-acceptance, that how can
Rumana,
one,
just 1 minute. I
yes,
want to interrupt
yes,
because we need to tell
so,
Manu that Urangi is an informal settlement, not
right,
like regular middle class settlements. So it is
yes.
almost poorest of the poor. Just so that. to set the context.
in Karachi, but yes. So, there the teachers were like, how can we use a storybook in the classroom? What do we do with this? I mean, we can read out the story. The children can read, but you are saying that so much else can be done. So therefore, this had to be put down in words and sessions. That okay, you can have x number of sessions, keeping in view this book and this story, but it can generate so many different activities. So and I think for me it was also very important, this whole thing about relevance that we talked about. By the time my own children were studying in a very prestigious school in Karachi, and I would look at those books and say, well, to grow olives in the Mediterranean region, or to mine coal in Germany, how is this relevant? So I actually took some children out of the school, and we took a round of the block, and I asked them to identify the trees around. And barring perhaps the coconut tree, because it's so obvious, they hardly knew any name of any tree or plant. And, so that was a reality check, that the textbooks that we are giving them are so totally irrelevant and hopeless, and no wonder they don't, take any interest. So, so one other thing was that I have written a few books that are about our own environment, and also about, I remember we had a very big debate about one book that I had written and illustrated. It was called Ul Bala. And Ul Bala was this monster of greed, actually, cutting of trees, and what you can call development. So the thing was, they said, oh, you are against development. I said, I'm not against development. I'm not trying to say that we should all go and live in caves. I'm simply saying that, all this encroachment and this greed, and it just doesn't stop. And we have been seeing this. And I wrote that book maybe sometime in the early 90s, and
I remember
to
you produced Kala Bhoot also about plastic bag.
yes, Kala Bhoot was also, I mean, maybe 30 years ago or more. In those days, I used to drive, and I was coming home after picking my two children who were in the back seat. I was from, school. I was bringing them home. They were very young, and a black polythene bag, it came and stuck on the windscreen, and I was almost going to have an accident. So I then thought about this, that everywhere there, and now we don't have the black ones, but we have them in other colors, and the white ones are still there. But I just thought that it is very important to say no to plastic, to say no to, and because I mean, all these years I have been using a tokri, a basket, and I encourage everyone to do that instead of, getting everything over here. People are, you go anywhere to buy vegetables or fruits or whatever, and they're so quick to just, for each and everything they would give you a plastic bag. Even if I have my tokri in front and say, you know please, मिर्ची भी इसमें डाल दूं, भिंडी भी इसमें डाल दूं, हाँ भाई डाल दो, सब डाल दो. So it's something that we need to kind of educate people.
Yeah, I want to draw your attention to one other aspect, that you introduced the concept of activity based learning, which is very important to
Well, I can't take the credit of,
yeah, but
I
your
can't say
group,
I
yeah,
introduced
yeah,
activity-based learning, but yes, I believed in that. I believe that, children learn best by doing, that is what is the general belief everywhere, where they put the child first. And so I also believed in that, and I thought that textbooks are not that important. Okay, they are in a way, but also they are not. And I also introduced children to dance and music and theater and art in a big way. And, because I feel that unless education has this holistic approach, we are not getting where we want to get. And it has been proven after like 75 years of our existence. We know that things have gone really wrong. I'm very happy to report to you that quite recently, and this is only in Sindh, in the public schools, they have introduced music. So it's really wonderful that there are enough enlightened people, and they, because I mean, as children, you would also remember that you never forget nursery rhymes or other poems, or even songs, even film songs. You always, if you put something to music, to a tune, and that you always remember.
yeah. I just want to add Romana here because in our Sufi tradition,
Hmm.
poetry is the basic form of sending the message because a rhyme people remember very well. So
Yes.
most of the Sufi teachings are in poetry, and then they're connected with ragas and music and dance also.
Yes.
But I want to talk about two very mundane things. One is about the pricing of these books. I think you made them affordable for ordinary students.
No, you see, those books that Fayaz Sahib is talking about, they were, each book was sponsored. So, that was a big factor in bringing the price down. But regular publishers here, I think it depends. If there are publishers who, it depends on the quantity, right? I mean, if there is a large quantity, then the per unit cost comes down. So it all depends on that. And so some publishers are able to do that, and some are not. So, but the other thing is, you see, Pakistan imports paper, which is a tragedy. We don't make paper. And when we had East Pakistan, we had the Karnafuli paper mills, and paper used to come from there. We had our own paper, but now we import from China and so on. So even the printing ink is imported. So that is another factor. And then there are probably duties on these things. So books
Yeah.
become
Actually,
expensive.
what I was pointing out was that by receiving support from philanthropists and even corporate sector, what you did was one is you introduced these books to all kinds of schools,
Right.
from Urdu medium schools to English medium schools, the whole
Yeah.
hierarchy. But
Yeah.
also you made it affordable for the students in very low income areas. For a small price, they could purchase the book. So
Yes.
that was also a very important intervention, joining hands with the philanthropists and making it accessible to the students and introducing activity based and thought based learning instead of rote based and sermon based learning. So instead of
Exactly.
giving them sermons about what to do or not to do, you told
Yeah.
them how plastic bags plays havoc with their life or what is happening to their environments.
Yeah, Yeah,
So make it, yeah.
the plastic bag was, if you recall, it was animated. So it kind of came into the house and then it flew off, and then, it went and hung around with its friends on trees and in the sea and so on, I believe that even if there are any lessons to be learned, they don't have to be in your face. It can be, the messages can be very subtle, and but the first and foremost point that is in front of me always is that it should be fun, it should be interesting, the child should be able to find it all very appealing and interesting. And I'm not saying at all that we should not have books which are very direct and very, but look at the quantum of our books. It is so small still after so many years. It is still very small. Urdu books for children are just not enough. So
Just
I
want to
think.
ask two more very practical things. One
Mhm.
is that when you introduce these books to school, the education bureaucracy comes into action and they say you can't teach anything which is not prescribed or approved by the textbook board. So that is one hurdle. The second is in some of the books which you produce for higher grade students like eighth or ninth Jalebi or something, you reproduce material which has already been published, and so you need copyright approval.
Right. So
And
if
third is to selling,
yes,
yeah.
yes, if the author or the poet has passed away and it has been 50 years, then it becomes copyright free. But for the others, we also had to take permission. Yes. But these are I mean, these men and women who are literary giants, and they have written such wonderful fiction for children. We just thought it'll be great to introduce the students to those things. So that is why. So Jalebia was actually for class 6, and then there was Master Sahab and others. Yeah, right up to class 10 or 11, I forget. Yeah, but we did those. But those were in the form of textbooks, with a number of lessons in each book. But the other books that I'm talking about, they were one story, one each. For me, as an artist, it is always there for me that instead of having like a signature style, I wanted to experiment. So the medium that I used for the books were different, and I really enjoyed that. So that was also something that is very interesting, because I feel that for young children, the text and the illustrations, they're both equally important. Maybe the illustrations are more important. Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, I have a question about that. How do you ensure that the illustrations and the writing is appropriate for the child? And what kind of standards do you align your books with? When do you know, oh, this is getting across the right message? And how do you know it's done?
um, Having my own children was a big help. you know uh, uh, my son will turn next month, he will turn 44, and my daughter 41. All those years ago they were very young, and therefore I feel it, you kind of know what works, and if you have been a teacher, that also helps, right? So you know that you kind of you it's I wouldn't say it's a hit and miss. Sometimes it could be a miss as well, but by and large, I think we knew. Yeah.
I know we talked about this a little bit and we have been consistently talking about it, but considering Pakistan's educational landscape, Did you face any socio-cultural challenges throughout your career, or throughout creating these books? Issues you found were barriers to creating these books?
Not really, Manur, frankly, not really, but more recently, there are some checks and measures. So if you want your books to go into public schools in particular, then you need NOCs for each book. I did not know about this, that even books that can go in the library would require. But for the last 3 years, in fact, this is the fourth year, I have been involved with Idare Talim o Agahi, ITA. Fayaz Saab, you might know Dr. Bela Raza Jamil, yeah. So she asked me to lead this project, and this was in partnership with Room to Read. Room to Read is based in California. And they have a literacy cloud, and they work in, I don't know, more than, I think, in at least 24 different countries in Asia and Africa. And they have children's storybooks on the literacy cloud in English, although originally these books were written in those languages, from each country. So I read a number of them, and then I shortlisted about 30 books, and out of that, 28 were adapted in Urdu. The illustrations remained as they were, but they were adapted in Urdu, and later on in Sindhi, then in Pashto and Dari. In Dari, especially for the Afghan refugee children. Now, these were the Urdu, Sindhi, Pashto, they were all meant to go to public school libraries. And so there had to be government approval. So, for example, from the Punjab Textbook Board or the Sindh Textbook Board and so on, they had to be each book had to receive an approval, an NOC, and only then they could be. So those are wonderful books. And currently, since last October, I'm involved with phase 2 of the project, in which we are developing original books with 3 Pakistani publishers. So 5 books each, 15 books. So I had to scout for 15 writers, 15 illustrators. Room to Read has an absolutely wonderful expert. He's a Sri Lankan. And he has come and held workshops, for book development and for writers. And then, so we are doing these books for really young children, say age 4 to 7. And I am learning a lot. I am because whatever I have done so far was more kind of intuitively, but it's a science. And in Pakistan, we have never and all those who participated, we also called the reviewers from the Punjab Textbook Board and from Sindh, and we held these in Lahore, these 3 workshops, and all of us felt that we have never had this kind of an opportunity. To sit together under one roof and to have this guidance, this training, how to go about writing for children or editing. And Room to Read was very what shall I say? They wanted a text editor and they wanted an art editor from each of the publishers. So some of the writers and illustrators we found, and some the publishers themselves had their own. But nobody really has an art editor, for example. It's something just unheard of. The publishing houses really don't have. So it's kind of training them how to look at illustrations, uh, in connection with the text. And even if the text says something and does not say something more, the illustrations can show that, because the illustrator can have that kind of a liberty to, because there is a lot of imagination and a lot of
To
good
stretch the
faith.
imagination, yeah,
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah, invite.
So, it's,
One more side question. You were talking of the library. Mostly we are talking of school libraries, but there are unconventional libraries also, like Aleph Laila Book Bus Society, who
Alif
have
Laila is
their,
one of the publishers we've taken.
okay, because they've created libraries in double-decker buses,
I know,
and
I
then
know.
they drive it
I,
around. And then I
yes,
have heard about Balochistan, that there are camel libraries. They're carrying the
that's
books
right.
on
Yeah.
camels and moving from
Yeah.
village to village.
So, an ITA, Bela started the Children's Literature Festival back in November 2011. It was, so that is how, she asked me to be on the board as an advisor. And so far, at least 90 such festivals have been held all over Pakistan since 2011 November. So,
Great, yeah.
yes, so multiple each year, and now we have changed the name to Pakistan Learning Festival. And there is a website, and you can look it up. And in fact, I designed the new logo for it. And so we are holding these because we are doing. It's not only literature, but also so much else. There is theater, there is music, there is science, there is, all kinds of. So the resource persons, there are several volunteers, people who volunteer and who hold various workshops and sessions for children and the teachers. So we rope in like scholars and historians and artists and scientists and so on. So it's really lovely. So we had like in Gilgit Baltistan, in Skardu, in Hunza and Skardu, and we've held it in places like Mithi in Tharparkar, and a few times in Bhavalpur, a few times in Karachi, a few times in Peshawar and Islamabad and Lahore, and other places also, Multan and so on. So it's in Hyderabad and Sakkar, and like I said, about 90 of them since 2011. So it's quite a feat, and that is how Bela. That is why she asked me to lead this project, and it's wonderful. I'm enjoying myself. Yeah.
So from my side, one last question, then they like Manur can ask more. How do you see your impact and the future of this kind of work?
I would say that there is an impact, but not wide enough. You know, it is still a drop in the bucket. I think we, like I said, unless and until there is a large number of such books that really, stimulate children's imagination, because that is what we are after. Their creativity, their imagination, making them think, and also at the same time to enjoy reading. I would say the impact, unless and like I said, unless the quantum is, so great that we have such interesting books in a very large quantity, and they reach everywhere. I mean, impact is there in pockets. I meet people. There are children who know me. So in a way, one feels that yes, okay, I'm reaching out. My books are reaching out. The stories are reaching out. But I feel that it is still not that kind of impact that one dreams of. It will take a while.
Didn't come up in the discussion. There are
Hmm.
government schools and there are private schools. No,
Hmm.
there's a large number of private schools. So, was there any difference in the level of acceptance between the government school and private schools, or
Well, the private schools are in a way more open to because the book group created that ground and that space for such books. I think the private schools are more receptive. The government schools, like I said, you can have the books in the library, but you can't still have them as textbooks. So that is a big difference, yes. And we are still very conservative. So things are seen with really very micro kind of lens. And so for when you create something for the government, I think it's not so easy.
I would just like to ask one final question before we wrap it up. And I just want to go back to our discussion about the impact. So, what's the biggest limitation that's decreasing the impact? Like, what barrier is there that isn't getting these storybooks published all over Pakistan?
I think it's also about the cost because, I mean, we look at our population and look at our large a city like Karachi or even if you print 1,000 copies and if you sell those, the publishers feel great. बट आई मीन इट्स जिसका उर्दू में मुहावरा है ना, ऊंट के मुंह में जीरा। तो ये वो वाली बात है ना कि आप इतने बड़े मुल्क में इतने लाखों करोड़ों लोगों का मुल्क है, बट you can't sell books. So there are many hurdles. Publishers don't want to invest in a large number of copies. उनकी मार्केटिंग की जो कुछ भी स्ट्रेटजी है, मे बी दैट इज नॉट इफेक्टिव and it doesn't happen. They're not peddling it door to door, or whatever reason. So there are several reasons. I think books don't do well. Yeah.
we need a business model to take it to a large scale?
Yes, for them it is a
Yeah.
business. In fact, ये वाला जो हम 15 किताबें कर रहे हैं, I went to several publishers and asked them if they would like some of, I mean, from these books, some of them to be published in Sindhi or Balochi or so on, and they said no. So one other thing that our languages are dying because we are not producing anything for children, no children's literature in the languages. I mean, कहने को तो हम लोग पता नहीं 60 70 75 जुबानें हैं इस मुल्क में, but we don't have children's literature. Yeah.
We can conclude by saying that there's kind of a dialogue needed with the decision makers in the government and private sector who talk of corporate social responsibility. So it needs to go up to that level to make a large scale difference. But you have done the basic work, shown them the way how education should be carried out, about the materials to be read, about the pedagogy, about the training of teachers. So it needs to be taken to scale.
Yes, the bottom line is that the child should be happy reading,
Yeah,
wanting to read.
right. Thank
To
you
my
so much.
mind, that is the bottom line. Yeah. But
Thank you. That's wonderful. Nice
thank you
story.
very
We'll
much,
be in
Rumana.
touch. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye bye.
yeah.